So we need to talk about two Supreme Court decisions which impact your right to prevent the unlawful search and seizure of firearms within your home without a warrant. So let's talk about this. Now this video is sponsored by SimpliSafe. There is no safe like SimpliSafe. SimpliSafe is the security system I personally use to protect my home and my family. As someone who values personal security and protecting what matters most, I can't stress enough the importance of having a very reliable security system, and I trust SimpliSafe with my home. SimpliSafe isn't just another alarm system, it's designed to protect you from all angles with motion sensors, entry sensors, indoor and outdoor cameras, and 24/7 personal monitoring that is always ready to respond when you need them the most. They have a ton of benefits, a ton of packages, and a ton of different monitors and systems that you can select and choose how you want to protect your family in your home. One of my favorite features is the indoor cameras. I use them to monitor key areas with my home. And if I'm being honest, sometimes I even just use them to check on my cats to see what they're doing. I also use the Active Guard outdoor protection to keep an eye on the outside of my property. Again, it's important to not just protect the inside, but also the outside of your home. In my personal opinion, I think everyone should have an outdoor camera. I think it's just a simple way to also monitor what's going on outside of your home. And one of the best parts is right now, if you sign up, you can save 50% off your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for the professional monitoring plan. You'll also get your first month completely free, and you simply just need to go to simplisafe.com/armscholar. That will be linked down below in the details section in the pinned comment, and you can customize your own system. That's simplisafe.com/armscholar. Again, links will be down below. And if you don't absolutely love your system, you can return it within 60 days for a full refund. No hassle and no risk, because again, there is no safe like SimpliSafe. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be discussing Supreme Court cases, one of which was a unanimous decision involving the warrantless search and seizure of firearms within the home, and the other decision deals with the community caretaking exception, which resulted in police not only threatening to hold an individual indefinitely, but then threatening to keep his firearms also indefinitely. The cases we're going to be talking about in this video are Caniglia versus Strom, and then also Torcivia versus Suffolk County. These cases should be on everyone's mind because they involve when law enforcement can use legal workarounds to not only enter your home without a warrant, but also confiscate your firearms without a warrant. Now, the facts surrounding the Torcivia case are very interesting. Mr. Wayne Torcivia is 57 years old. He has no criminal record, no record of violence, no mental health issues. However, early in the morning of April 6th in 2014, his teenage granddaughter called social services. She called him on them, complaining that her grandfather was yelling at her and acting weird and irrational. Now, following the call from his granddaughter, social services contacted the Suffolk County Police Department, who then sent 3 police officers to the home of Mr. Torcivia. Now, when the police officers arrived at his home, they all agreed after talking to Mr. Torcivia that, nothing had been committed, no crimes have been committed, nothing really was going on, and that the granddaughter's complaint really was false. However, at one point during the discussion between Mr. Torcivia and one of the police officers, the officer kind of turned slightly and accidentally knocked down a magnetic drape that was attached to the front door where they were talking. According to the reports, Mr. Torcivia then rapidly bent down to pick up the drape that had fallen, and the officer reacted and screamed at him very loudly to get back and then threatened to tase him if he didn't get back. Now, in response, Mr. Torcivia claims that he simply stated to the police officer not to tase him because he has a heart condition and he could die. But the police officer alleges that he heard Mr. Torcivia say that he wanted to be tased and that he wanted to die. And because of this interaction, Mr. Torcivia was arrested and then placed on psychiatric hold, not only because of this interaction, because of the call also from the granddaughter. And from there is really where all this spirals out of control. After dropping him off for the psych evaluation, one of the police officers learned through a computer check that he had a New York State pistol license and that he potentially also had firearms. The police officer then contacted his sergeant, who then told him to get into connection and contact with Mrs. Torcivia and try to get the guns, get her to, on her own, give up those firearms. However, she refused. They talked also to Mr. Torcivia, and he also refused to give up those firearms. Eventually, Mr. Torcivia's psych evaluation came back clear the next day, about 12 hours later, and he was recommended to be discharged. However, a social worker on the case found out that there was a gun issue, and she told her intern to get the combination for the gun safe. So they contacted the wife and Mr. Torcivia, and they essentially threatened both of them through the police department as well, told them that if they did not give up the firearms, Mr. Torcivia would have to remain indefinitely within the hospital on psych evaluation. Under threat of being held indefinitely, he eventually gave up the firearms. This issue spiraled from a baseless call from a teenage granddaughter all the way to being held in mental health facility and being threatened to be, held there and not released until he gave up the firearms. This also was done all without a warrant, and he still has not received his handguns back. Now, this case made its way to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals for review, and on review, the Second Circuit found that the police could do this under the special needs exception to the warrants requirement. In reaching that ruling, the Second Circuit largely ignored a prior Supreme Court decision. It was a unanimous decision that came in a case called Caniglia versus Strom. Now, if you're not aware, the Supreme Court has issued this unanimous ruling in the Caniglia case, very similar, and in that case, it dealt with the community caretaking exception to the Fourth Amendment, and when that applies to vehicles, and potentially could it extend also to the warrantless search and seizure of firearms within a home. Caniglia made its way to the Supreme Court, and the court issued a unanimous decision in favor of Mr. Caniglia. Justice Thomas, writing for the majority, stated in the opinion that what is reasonable for vehicles is different from what is reasonable for homes. Katie acknowledged as much, and this court has repeatedly declined to expand the scope of exceptions to the warrant requirement to permit warrantless entry into the home. Based on this, the Supreme Court unanimously found that the warrantless entry into the home of Mr. Caniglia was indeed unconstitutional. Now, going back to Torcivia, this case, was reviewed by the Second Circuit, but they just outright refused to apply the Caniglia rationale, and they did not look at what the Supreme Court said in Caniglia. The government argued that the special needs exception to the warrant requirement is different from the community caretaking's exception that was considered in the Caniglia case. Ultimately, the Supreme Court agreed with the government not only that the summary reversal was improper, but that review in this case should not be granted. Therefore, they issued an order denying cert in the Torcivia case. Now, these cases are important because they deal with your protection against search and seizure of firearms within your home without a warrant under some of these loose government rationales like the community caretaking exception and the special needs exception. These loose exceptions are being used more and more to enter into your home without a warrant and using these workarounds so that police and law enforcement do not have to get these warrants to search and seize for firearms. There are plenty of real-world examples of this type of event happening. States like California are being even more aggressive with red flag laws, and every day I see news reports and local reports of people getting jammed up based on searches and seizures, sometimes potentially even unlawful, but they get jammed up and these types of things are seized, their firearms are confiscated, or, through some broad search, they also find firearms and someone gets jammed up even more. There are also active cases going on right now at higher levels, like in the Sixth Circuit, in the Novak case. That one dealt with an individual who was renting out his hunting cabin to a tenant, and the tenant got in a domestic dispute with his girlfriend. And because of that domestic dispute, the police officers then searched and seized firearms of the cabin owner. He had some firearms that he kept at this hunting cabin, and because of that domestic violence of the tenant, police officers came into the cabin, searched and seized all of those rifles, handguns, and all the things that he kept in his hunting cabin. And currently that is in front of the Sixth Circuit. He still has not got his firearms back. He has tried multiple times to get his firearms back. And in fact, the Sixth Circuit has seemed kind of dumbfounded during the oral arguments that the law enforcement officers have not returned those firearms. So this is something that happens in the real world that you need to be aware of. So I want to make you guys aware of these critical Supreme Court cases and just generally this topic so you're more aware about what can happen. If you have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I will try to answer to the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.